Dubai, world's tallest building, world's largest mall, an indoor ski slope in 120-degree heat. Oil pays for all of this, right? Wrong. Oil is less than 1% of Dubai's GDP. 1%. So what is paying for the world's most extravagant city? Debt. $80 billion of it, and a labor system the United Nations calls modern slavery. And if you think the 2009 crash taught them a lesson, UBS just flagged Dubai as one of the world's most overheated property markets. Again, the bill is coming due. But here's the kicker. This isn't just a Dubai story. If you've got money in real estate, crypto, or anything linked to Gulf capital, you're already in this story. Because this is bigger than one city in the desert. Dubai's story touches three things that should keep you up at night. First, the human cost. Dubai's workforce is over 90% foreign. Non-Emiratis make up 96.4% of the male population. These workers are bound by something called the kafala system, a sponsorship model that ties your legal right to exist in the country to your employer. Human rights organizations call it modern indentured servitude. Second, the financial risk. Dubai just recorded $147 billion in real estate transactions in 2025 alone. But Fitch Ratings is predicting a 10 to 15% price correction, warning that 210,000 new housing units could flood the market. If you're thinking about buying property in Dubai, moving there for a tax-free salary, or investing in anything linked to Gulf real estate, this video is for you. Third, the geopolitical dimension. Saudi Arabia just launched a $4 trillion challenge to Dubai's entire business model. Over 600 companies have already relocated their headquarters from Dubai to Riyadh. But to understand how Dubai got trapped, you have to go back to the beginning, to a time before the skyscrapers, before the artificial islands, when Dubai was just a small fishing village with a very big dream. Here's something most people don't know. Dubai barely had any oil. Abu Dhabi, the emirate next door, controlled 95% of the UAE's reserves. Dubai's slice was tiny and finite. Sheikh Rashid bin Saeed Al Maktoum, the father of modern Dubai, saw the writing on the wall decades before anyone else. There's a quote attributed to him, and it's a good one. "My grandfather rode a camel, my father rode a camel, I drive a Mercedes, my son drives a Land Rover, his son will drive a Land Rover, but his son will ride a camel." He understood that oil was a ticking clock. So in the 1960s and 70s, Dubai started pivoting. Jebel Ali Port, Dubai Aluminium, the World Trade Center. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. If you can't export resources, export services. Become the Singapore of the Middle East. In 1985, they launched Emirates Airlines, a bet that connectivity could replace petroleum. By the 1990s, oil production was declining, so Dubai doubled down on tourism and real estate. The Burj Al Arab project was approved in 1994, the world's first 7-star hotel. A brand was being built, and here's the key number. Oil once accounted for over 50% of Dubai's GDP. Today, less than 1%. Over 95% of the economy is non-oil. That's either the greatest diversification story in economic history or a leveraged bet funded by someone else's oil money. Now fast forward to the 2000s. This is where things get wild. Dubai invented something the International Herald Tribune called centrally planned free market capitalism. No income tax, no corporate tax, until they introduced 9% in June 2023. Freehold property rights for foreigners, and a ruler, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, whose entire philosophy boiled down to 5 words. Build it and they will come. And they built it through something called GREs, government-related entities. Think of them as state-linked companies that operated like private corporations, but with an implicit government guarantee. At least, that's what everyone believed. Dubai World, the government's investment arm. Nakheel, the company that built the Palm Islands. Emaar Properties, Burj Khalifa, Dubai Mall. These were the vehicles of the miracle. Between 2001 and 2007, according to the IMF, Dubai's GDP grew at an average of 14.7% per year. The investment to GDP ratio hit 44% in 2007. International money flooded in. Palm Jumeirah alone cost $12 billion. The Burj Khalifa, $1.5 billion. And every investor, every bank, every sovereign wealth fund made the same fatal assumption. Abu Dhabi's oil wealth implicitly guaranteed all of Dubai's debts. That assumption was the foundation everything was built on. By 2008, every major bank, every sovereign wealth fund, every expat investor was all in on Dubai. And they were all making the same fatal assumption. We'll get to what that assumption was, and why it destroyed everything, in a moment. November 25, 2009. Dubai World, the government's own investment arm, sitting on $59 billion in total liabilities, announced it would seek a 6-month standstill on debt repayments. The immediate trigger? A $3.5 billion Islamic bond issued by Nakheel, due in days. Then came the line that blindsided every investor on the planet. The Dubai government announced it was not liable for Dubai World's debts. Remember that implicit guarantee everyone assumed? It was a fantasy. It never existed. Property prices crashed 50% from their peak. Some properties lost 70%. And at Dubai International Airport, roughly 3,000 luxury cars sat abandoned, left by expats fleeing the country overnight to avoid imprisonment. Because in the UAE, debt wasn't just a financial problem, it was a criminal offense. The Mirage shattered, and what came next exposed every crack in Dubai's glittering facade. Global markets reacted violently. Credit default swap spreads on Dubai's debt spiked to 541 basis points. Stock markets worldwide plunged. The real estate market, the engine of the entire economy, collapsed. In the first quarter of 2009 alone, house prices fell 40%. Let me give you the specifics because the numbers are staggering. Garden Homes villas crashed from 15 million dirhams to 6 million. Signature villas on Palm Jumeirah fell from 25 million to 12 million. Apartments in Jumeirah Lake Towers dropped from 1,500 dirhams per square foot to 700. Construction projects froze. Cranes stood idle across the skyline. The city that never stopped building, stopped. Now let's talk about the people who actually built this city, because this part doesn't make it into the tourism brochures. The UAE has the highest proportion of international migrants in the world. 88% of the population, 8.7 million people, are foreign workers. In Dubai specifically, non-Emiratis make up 96.4% of the male population and 99% of the female population over age 15. Let that sink in. 99%. Over 12,000 workers constructed the Burj Khalifa alone. Primarily South Asian laborers earning a fraction of what the apartments they were building would sell for. Under the kafala system, their visas are tied to their employer. They can't change jobs, they can't leave the country, they can't escape abuse without their employer's permission. Documented abuses include passport confiscation, wage theft, illegal recruitment fees that create debt bondage, no minimum wage, and a ban on trade unions. The Walk Free Global Slavery Index ranks the UAE 7th globally in modern slavery prevalence. 132,000 individuals living in modern slavery on any given day. And here's a number that should haunt you. In 2006, the Indian consulate in Dubai reported 109 Indian blue-collar worker suicides in the UAE in a single year. Imagine building the world's tallest tower and not being allowed to live in the city it stands in. When the 2009 crisis hit, hundreds of thousands of these workers lost their jobs and were forced to leave, many with unpaid wages. The cynical truth? Dubai's miracle was built on a permanent underclass with no path to citizenship, no labor protections, and no political voice. The kafala system isn't a bug, it's the engine. When your entire construction workforce earns $300 a month with no ability to negotiate, your building costs are artificially low. That's not efficiency, that's a subsidy paid in human dignity. December 14, 2009. Abu Dhabi stepped in with a $10 billion bailout. Dubai's stock market immediately surged 10.4%. CDS spreads fell from 541 to 417. 4.1 billion went straight to Nakheel, to avoid default on the Islamic bond maturing that same day. Dubai officials insisted, no strings attached. Dubai has not given anything up. But here's the price nobody could spin. The Burj Dubai, the world's tallest building, Dubai's proudest symbol, was renamed the Burj Khalifa, in honor of Abu Dhabi's ruler, Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Dubai's crown jewel now bore the name of its rescuer. If that's not a power move, I don't know what is. Total bailout package? Around $20 billion when you include the central bank loans and state bank support. And the IMF later noted that Dubai's debt exceeded 100% of its GDP. And the capital that flooded back in, it wasn't exactly clean. The OCCRP's Dubai Unlocked investigation in 2024 revealed that criminals, sanctioned individuals, and corrupt politicians own real estate across the city. We're talking specific names: Obaid Kanani, US sanctioned for money laundering, property on Palm Jumeirah; Daniel Kinahan, alleged Irish drug cartel leader, Jumeirah Bay Tower; Candido Nsue Okomo, under investigation for embezzlement, apartment in the Burj Khalifa itself. After Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Russian nationals purchased $6.3 billion in Dubai property, a more than tenfold increase. Leaked data identified 5,000 Russian citizens owning 6,600 properties. Among them, Anna Chapman, former Russian spy; Grigory Anikiv, sitting member of the Russian State Duma, who bought a $13 million penthouse on the Palm. Then there's the gold. Al Jazeera's Gold Mafia investigation exposed networks smuggling African gold through Dubai for resmelting. According to the Swiss research organization Swissaid, at least 435 metric tons of gold, worth approximately $31 billion, were smuggled from Africa in 2022. 405 metric tons of that went specifically to the UAE. The FATF placed the UAE on its financial grey list in March 2022. They removed it in February 2024, but the European Parliament opposed the removal, citing a lack of concrete evidence that reforms were actually implemented. So the recovery wasn't built on reformed foundations. It was built on even shakier ones, which is exactly why what's about to happen is so dangerous. Now, despite all of this, Dubai survived. It rebuilt. Tourists came back. 19.6 million visitors in 2025. Dubai International Airport handled 95.2 million passengers, the world's busiest international airport. Emirates posted a $4.7 billion profit. Not a loss leader, a genuine profit center. Hotel occupancy hit 80.7%. Official debt to GDP dropped from 70% in 2021 to 34% by end of 2024. And Expo 2020 is projected to contribute over $42 billion to the UAE economy over 3 decades. Sounds like the model works, right? Not so fast. Here's what's about to change everything. Dubai's entire economic model is being copied by a neighbor with 10 times the money. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman launched Vision 2030, a $4 trillion economic overhaul. But the real weapon isn't the money. It's an ultimatum called Project HQ. Any company wanting Saudi government contracts must relocate its regional headquarters to Riyadh. Over 600 companies have already complied. Northern Trust, Bechtel, PepsiCo. Saudi Arabia led the entire G20 in tourist growth, 73% increase versus pre-pandemic. Dubai, 11.4. And starting January 2025, Saudi cleared foreigners to buy property. Direct competition for Dubai's investor class. Hey, quick question for the comments. If you had to bet your savings on Dubai or Saudi Arabia winning this economic war, which would you choose? Drop your answer below. And here's the irony that makes this a true trap. Think of Dubai's economy like a bicycle. It only works when you're pedaling. The moment you stop, you fall over. That's the sand trap. And here's why there's no getting off. Dubai's entire economic model depends on a workforce that is over 90% foreign, with no path to citizenship and no permanent stake in the country. The kafala system keeps labor costs artificially low, and that's essential for the real estate and construction model to function. But this creates fundamental fragility. In every downturn, the workforce simply leaves. There is no domestic consumer base to cushion the blow. When foreigners lose jobs in Dubai, they lose residency. They must leave the country. That's why the non-Emirati unemployment rate is 0.3%. It's not because there's no unemployment, it's because unemployed foreigners disappear from the statistics. They're deported by default. Meanwhile, 85% of Emirati nationals work in the public sector, according to the IMF. The private economy is entirely foreign-powered. The obvious fix: grant citizenship to millions of workers. But that would upend the political structure entirely. Labor reforms in 2020 eased some restrictions, but according to the Arab Democracy and Human Rights Barometer, gaps in law implementation and enforcement still render migrant workers vulnerable. Compare this to Singapore, similar foreign workforce dependency, but far more investment in social infrastructure and worker protections. The 2009 crisis was never truly resolved. The debt was restructured, rolled over, and buried under new growth. Sound familiar? It should, because it's the exact playbook that preceded the next correction. Dubai's official outstanding debt stands at 112.4 billion dirhams, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 20.8% as of December 2025. Sounds manageable, right? But that number excludes GRE debt, and it excludes the $35 billion Al Maktoum Airport expansion, a bet that 260 million passengers per year are coming. That's 5 times current capacity. If that bet is wrong, it's a $35 billion white elephant sitting in the desert. The real estate market is booming again. 2024 transactions hit 532 billion dirhams, the highest since records began. A 31% year-on-year increase. Prices are now 30.5% above the 2014 peak. And here's the number that should terrify you. 72% of all transactions in 2025 are off-plan. Buyers purchasing properties 2 to 4 years before delivery. That's not end-user demand. That's speculation, pure and simple. The pipeline? 55,000 new units in 2026. 75,000 in 2027. Some estimates say 300,000 by 2029. Meanwhile, rental growth is already decelerating, from over 20% to about 6%. UBS notes that prices now outpace rents for the first time since 2021, and incomes are lagging property values. Let that sink in. 72% of the market is buying buildings that don't exist yet. And this trap has a built-in accelerant. Dubai's model requires permanent population growth to sustain real estate values. Population grew 15% since 2020, now over 4 million, with a 2040 target of 5.8 million. But 88% are foreigners on temporary visas. They can leave overnight, as 2009 proved. No democratic accountability, no independent judiciary, no safety net. If sentiment shifts, the exodus mechanism is built into the system. We saw this exact pattern play out in the 2014 to 2020 downturn. Property prices declined 25 to 33% from the 2014 peak, falling from around 1,650 dirhams per square foot to 916. Dubai has now surpassed those 2014 peaks by 30.5%. We're back in the same speculative territory that preceded the last correction. Saudi Arabia isn't just competing, it's actively poaching Dubai's clients. Riyadh requires government contracts to go only to companies headquartered in Saudi cities. A new Saudi airline, Riyadh Air, is launching with a Boeing 787 fleet, a direct Emirates competitor. Red Sea resorts, entertainment districts, sports tourism, all aimed squarely at Dubai's market. But here's the contrarian twist nobody's talking about. NEOM, Saudi Arabia's flagship mega-project, the supposed existential threat to Dubai, has spectacularly failed. The Public Investment Fund suspended construction on September 16, 2025. After spending $50 billion, only 2.4 kilometers of the planned 170 kilometers has been built. A 2023 internal board presentation reported by the Wall Street Journal estimated the total completion cost at $8.8 trillion, 25 times Saudi Arabia's annual budget, with a projected completion date of 2080. The internal audit found, quote, evidence of deliberate manipulation by project management. In August 2025, PIF wrote down $8 billion from major projects including NEOM. So Saudi competition is real, but execution is chaotic. Dubai's advantage is that it already exists. Saudi Arabia's advantage is unlimited capital. The question is timing, and Dubai is being squeezed between needing to spend more to stay competitive and the risk of accumulating more debt to do so. Now, you might be thinking, there have to be easy fixes here. Let me run through them. But they have no income tax. True, but government revenue depends entirely on fees, real estate transactions, and Abu Dhabi transfers. No fiscal buffer. That 9% corporate tax introduced in 2023. That was the first admission of this vulnerability. But debt to GDP is down. Official government debt is down, but exclude GRE debt and mega-project commitments, and total exposure is far higher than the headline number. But everyone loves Dubai. Everyone loved it in 2007 too. Sentiment is not a structural foundation. Just diversify more. Dubai is already one of the most diversified Gulf economies, but its diversification is into sectors, real estate, tourism, finance, that are all correlated. They all depend on foreign capital inflow and global sentiment. A single shock hits all three simultaneously. Just attract more tourists. Dubai welcomed 19.6 million visitors in 2025, but Saudi Arabia already surpassed Dubai in total visitor numbers back in 2019, 17.5 million versus 16.8 million, and they're investing aggressively to widen that gap. If you've been nodding along saying, yeah, but they fixed the debt, or, but everyone loves Dubai, congratulations, you just listed exactly the same arguments people made in 2007. Do the math, which brings us to the ultimate question. What happens when all of these traps converge? The core insight is this: Dubai's miracle is a perpetual motion machine that only works if it never stops. It needs permanent population growth, permanent construction, permanent capital inflow, and permanent faith in the brand. The moment any one of these stalls, the entire system is exposed. We've seen this story before. Think of Iceland in 2008, a small, open economy with rapid debt-fueled growth that crashed so spectacularly the country nearly ceased to function. The Guardian described Dubai as teetering on the brink like Iceland. Or think of Japan's 1980s real estate bubble, astronomical property values fueled by speculation that took decades to unwind. Dubai's 40% price surge since 2020 echoes the speculative frenzy of 1980s Tokyo. But here's the critical difference. Japan's bubble was domestic credit. Dubai's is foreign capital that can leave overnight. And if you're invested in anything connected to Dubai, that includes yours. Every Dubai bust has followed the same pattern: overbuilding, oversupply, sentiment shift, exodus, price collapse, Abu Dhabi bailout. 2009 was supposed to be the lesson. Instead, the cycle is repeating, at a larger scale. And here's why the next crisis will be fundamentally different from 2009. Back then, Abu Dhabi was a willing savior. Today, Abu Dhabi is increasingly a competitor, investing in its own tourism, its own financial sector, its own cultural institutions on Saadiyat Island and Yas Island. Saudi Arabia is an active rival. There may be no bailout next time. The UAE's sovereign credit rating remains strong: AA from S&P, AA2 from Moody's, AA- from Fitch, but those ratings reflect the Federation, not Dubai alone. Real estate and construction account for over 17% of Dubai's GDP. Rental prices surged 20% in key areas in 2024. The city's own popularity is becoming a risk factor. Its success is cannibalizing itself. This is the sand trap. Dubai can't stop building because the economy depends on construction. It can't stop growing because real estate values depend on demand. It can't stop borrowing because mega projects need financing. And it can't diversify away from real estate because that is the diversification from oil. The machine only works if it accelerates. The moment it slows down, gravity catches up. So what happens next? Is there any way out of the sand trap? There are three ways this plays out. Population growth absorbs the supply glut. Prices correct 10 to 15%, then stabilize. Saudi competition stumbles, and NEOM's spectacular failure suggests this is plausible. 50 billion spent for 2.4 kilometers. The Al Maktoum airport succeeds. Abu Dhabi remains a willing backstop. Dubai leverages its genuine strengths. The Dubai International Financial Center just announced a 100 billion dirham expansion. The legal framework is established. The infrastructure is world-class. The Dubai Economic Agenda, they call it D33, aims to double the economy by 2033. Real estate growth moderates to a sustainable 3 to 8%. Dubai becomes what it always should have been: a smaller, smarter Singapore of the Middle East. Less dazzle, more durability. Probability? Moderate. But it requires global conditions to stay favorable and Dubai to show a discipline it has never demonstrated. Or, supply overwhelms demand in 2026 and 2027. 55 to 75,000 new units hitting the market. Prices fall 15 to 25%. Off-plan buyers face negative equity, and with 72% of transactions being off-plan, developers are exposed to massive cancellation risk. The expat exodus accelerates, creating the same feedback loop we saw in 2009. Abu Dhabi provides another bailout, but with strings attached this time. Dubai survives, but loses the miracle narrative for good. Probability? Meaningful. Fitch's own correction scenario already acknowledges this. Or the worst case: global recession, oil price crash, regional conflict, all three at once. Capital flight, construction freeze, mass unemployment. Abu Dhabi forced to choose between its own priorities and Dubai's debts, in a world where Abu Dhabi is also competing, and Saudi Arabia is not going to help. The kafala system's human cost becomes a geopolitical liability, and the losers are always the same: migrant workers left stranded, middle-class expats who lose their savings, small businesses crushed by the downturn. Probability? Low, but not negligible. And that's what makes it a trap. The downside is existential. Dubai isn't a scam. It's something more interesting than that. It's a $120 billion experiment in whether you can build a world-class economy on ambition, debt, and sheer willpower, while the sand shifts beneath your feet. The question isn't whether the model works. It clearly does, for now. The question is what happens when it stops working, and whether the people who built it, and the millions who live in it, have a plan for that. And if you haven't seen our deep dive into America's $35 trillion debt trap, check it out. Links on screen. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your prediction in the comments. Soft landing, repeat, or reckoning.